You did this. You know how delicate he is.
We were attacking Mrs. K.
Don't try and blame anyone else.
Let me
Step back!
Oh, I've heard of you, Miss Marsh. And I don't want a dirty girl like you touching my son.
Mrs. K,
No! You are all monsters. All of you. And Eddie is done with you. Do you hear? Done!
What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from the Quartering, and zoinks! The box office numbers are in for The Rise of Skywalker, and they aren't good. I mean, I suppose we have to grade on a curve here because from the jump, I've always said, of course, the movie's going to make $1 billion, but it has joined the $100 million losers club. Now, to be fair, you must be a pretty big box office ticket to join that club. However, it's not a great sign for the long tail revenue of this film as it continues to get destroyed overseas and numbers continue to drop here in the United States. This, according to Forbes and good old Scott Mendelson, saying box office Rise of Skywalker falls 59% to join the $100 million losers club. Walt Disney and Lucasfilm Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker has earned a still potent $361 million domestic and $725 million worldwide in just under 2 weeks in global theatrical release. So clearly, a lot of people are still seeing the film. Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker earned $72 million in its second weekend of domestic release. That's down 60% from its $177 million opening, giving it a still strong $361 million 10-day total. That's slightly under the $368 10-day for Last Jedi. That Star Wars sequel infamously tumbled 67% in its second weekend, partially because the holidays didn't start till the second Monday, for a $71 million Friday to Sunday frame. Now, that's a lot of numbers. However, it made $220 million in opening weekend. It lost a whopping $149 million between the first and second weekends, while Rise of Skywalker, quote, lost, quote, only $105 million. Yes, for better or worse, Star Wars 9 has become the latest member of the $100 million losers club. Now, there is something different about the Star Wars fandom in that they will see a movie 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times in a theater, really pumping those early numbers for Disney. And that's exactly what you're seeing. It's just not playing well with the overall crowds. And that is in the face of all sorts of shenanigans. You know, when you're talking about the things that Rotten Tomatoes is doing to keep the movie high, even though it's at 55% still from the critics, you might be shocked. Brace yourselves. It's still at 86% audience score with 70,000 reviews in there. There's no more denying that Rotten Tomatoes obviously is up to shenanigans with their numbers. There's no doubt about it. When we look at similar films that had huge drops as well, though, we look at Avengers Endgame, which dropped $210 million between weekends, $147 million down to from $357 million, and Star Wars: The Last Jedi dropped $149 million. So this is not uncommon of gigantic, super huge mega releases, but it's not a good sign for Disney. When you look at the question here, as the article continues, is whether or not Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker just fell like, quote, normal, even with Christmas holiday frame, because it opened with $177 million, because the audience caught up with it and saw it again in the first 4 weekends, including Christmas on Wednesday, or if the movie isn't playing all that hot. The good news is, there still is another week of holiday play before everyone goes back to school or work and 2020 begins in earnest. How it fares this week will determine how close it gets to the $620 million domestic total of The Last Jedi. It doesn't look like it's going to beat The Last Jedi, which, first of all, to even be close to The Last Jedi, when you're talking about the conclusion of the saga, is a huge egg on your face. It's definitely not a good sign at all. And when you look at the The Force Awakens, which earned $143 million in its first Monday through Thursday frame and then fell just 21% to $112 million over the next Monday before the end of the holiday season. That's a best case scenario performance here, which will give The Rise of Skywalker $87 million between tomorrow and Thursday and give it $450 million total as it enters its third weekend. That would be a bit behind the $464 million of The Last Jedi. Barring a leggy miracle, it would be fair that there's a lot less competition versus 2 years ago. Rise of the Skywalker will have to settle for $525 to $600 million domestic. Now, obviously, we're talking about gigantic numbers here. Disney's still going to make, I don't know, I'm going to guess $100 million. It's still ridiculously huge. I don't know that the Star Wars movies are doing the best to drive people into their theme parks like they hoped. I don't think that merch sales are going to be driven by these movies, especially with forgettable characters. But the film itself certainly is going to make them money. Probably. Now, we never really know until really far into the future what they spend on marketing. But Mendelsohn continues to say, we're not talking about a catastrophe here, at least not over the short term. The movie's still going to earn domestically offhand at least $500 million and possibly as much as $600 million while crossing the $1 billion global. It's arguably a disappointment in comparison over some overperforming Disney blockbusters like The Incredibles 2, Avengers, and Lion King, and the presumption that Star Wars by default must be the king of the blockbuster hill. Come what may, in 2019, Marvel is the unqualified ruler of the blockbuster mountain, while Fast and Furious rules over China. Disney's Star Wars may just, especially without George Lucas's involvement, just be another very big franchise among other big brands. That's actually really sad. That it's just another movie franchise because it's still Star Wars. But that is what happens when you're taken over by a corporate overlord. He continues to talk about how they should have waited for 2020 to release this film. Delaying The Rise of Skywalker to next year after an already stacked 2019 slate would have given Disney a surefire billion-dollar grosser for the next year, while presumably delivering less rushed and more coherent Skywalker finale. Walt Disney didn't really need Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker in 2019. They had $12 billion in combined global grosses from Walt Disney releases, the May to December Fox and Fox Searchlight releases, and even overseas grosses for M. Night Shyamalan's Glass. When The Rise of Skywalker crosses $1 billion worldwide, which it still likely will, it'll be their seventh such film in just this year. Disney is having a record-crushing year in terms of market share and overall grosses, a slate comprised of Captain Marvel, Avengers Endgame, Aladdin, Toy Story 4, The Lion King, Frozen 2, didn't need Star Wars, and rushing the film into theaters anyway may have done a major disservice to the property. Actually, pretty good point from Mendelsohn here. Be it a truncated schedule, conflicting ideas of what Skywalker finale should be, or concerns that the audience really did dislike The Last Jedi, which sold more Blu-rays than Avengers Infinity War early on yet. The Rise of Skywalker bears all the marks of a chaotic production. Major plot points like what Finn is trying to confess to Rey go unanswered. Major exposition dramatically retcons what we presumed in The Last Jedi or even The Return of the Jedi. The film has a frantic pacing, character-light plotting, and a find the thing and solve the puzzle video game, and one of the most popular newbies, Kylo Ren, has barely a single line in the second half of the 142-minute movie. Yes, the film looks rushed, comprised, traced over, stitched together in the editing room, considering the rushed production schedule. Giving Abrams and Chris Terrio and Kathleen Kennedy more time would have probably netted, or at least a more coherent final product. Since Walt Disney would like to keep making Star Wars movies, ideally as alternating Christmas releases, beginning in 2022. It's almost as important that Rise of Skywalker be a critical and commercial winner as Force Awakens was back in 2015. While the movie isn't a flop by any means, the reviews are mixed negative, with the audience pulling mixed at best. With $361 million in 10 days, it's not much leggier than The Last Jedi, which didn't have a full week before the post-debut holiday break kicked in. When we look at the Chinese market, Ip Man 4 is crushing Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker at the Chinese box office. That's something that's really interesting to me because the last couple films just did crazy well in China. You wonder why they're turned off by the latest franchise. I mean, not much has really changed. You could argue that The Last Jedi disappointed there, because if The Force Awakens, obviously people want to see a Star Wars film, so they go see it. Then they see The Last Jedi and they're disappointed, so then they don't see the third movie. You never really see the effects of a bad film in a series until the next one, because they've already committed to seeing the bad film. In a lot of ways, it's like Jordan Peele's sophomore effort, which I thought was awful, but I still paid to see it. So he still made a bunch of money on his second movie, but there's no chance I'm going to go see Candyman because the last one was just terrible. When you see, it looks like, this according to comicbook.com, it looks like Star Wars Rise of Skywalker is yet to find a footing in China. The film made its opening the other week with little success. The Chinese box office has not eased up on the film. After all, the Skywalker saga finale is being crushed by another release, and the Chinese franchise is plenty happy to roll in the cash, which Kylo Ren will never see. As reported by Variety, the box office turnout for Rise of the Skywalker has not been ideal in China, the country which one of the entertainment's major markets gave a paltry $2 million to Star Wars in the second week. The movie made less than 3% of China's theatrical screenings and isn't expected to break out big overseas either. In fact, the website Maoyan updated its estimate grosses for The Rise of the Skywalker the other day. Currently, it predicts the movie will earn just $19 million in China, which will make the franchise's lowest grossing movie yet in the market. Rogue One earned little more than $69 million before The Last Jedi slipped to about $43. So essentially, they had a lot of early interest and they just don't like the films. I think that's fair to say. You know, could we jump in a time machine and see if they would have fallen in love back with the original trilogy? Well, that's impossible to know, but certainly Disney is not happy with this film's production long term. You know, the DVD sales, whether or not it's going to sell merch, these are questions that are yet to be answered. But hopefully, for the Star Wars fandom, Disney will learn its lesson and start to treat this trilogy with respect. The fandom is a forgiving one, but you've got to show them something first. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.